Hi there and welcome to WB Fun Woodworking. I'm Don. In this video I'm sharing with you how I batched out these pizza cutters last year for Christmas. How I designed the handle, how I turned the handle, and all the other aspects of batching out. I think I made 15 of these last year. Now I realize that some of you live in countries where you may not celebrate Christmas, but you do celebrate other gift-giving holidays, and I'm putting some of those on the screen now to give kind of recognition for the different cultures out there. So no matter what gift-giving holidays you have, giving something like this to people is really fun. It's really enjoyable. I like doing it. It's one of the reasons I bought a lathe, because doing a present like this is very quick and very easy compared to making them a piece of furniture. So this is a video that hopefully will help some of you come up with a really good idea for Christmas presents or presents for whatever holidays. Pam and I decided to use zebra wood for the handles for the pizza cutters. We knew that most of our friends would have no idea what zebra wood was or where it comes from, and we thought it was a beautiful wood to use. The blanks that I got from my supplier were 24 inches long. One of the things that I do when I batch out presents is I make a prototype so that Pam can see what the final product is going to look like. My prototype was 6 inches long, so I cut each of the blocks into 6-inch pieces. Since these turning blocks were a little over 2 inches square, I had to cut them down a little bit on the bandsaw so that they would fit into my chuck. I set my bandsaw fence at a little over 1 3/4 inches, and I made sure that it was square using my combination square. I really like this magnetic Carter fence for my bandsaw. Yes, the piece of wood says $18, but I didn't pay full price. But even without my discount, that means that each handle costs only $6. That's pretty good for a present. My stack of turning blocks is ready to go. The next step was to check the ends for square. Those that were square went to the stack on my right, and those that weren't square went to the ones on my left. I squared up the ends that weren't square using my miter saw. And yes, I checked it for square, so it was doing a good job. After getting all the ends square, I marked the center point on each end of the blanks. I mounted each handle blank in the chuck of my lathe. Because of the way these pizza cutters are designed, I had to drill a hole into one end of the blanks. Since zebra wood is considered a hardwood, the directions said to use a 1/2-inch drill for this. The depth of the hole is supposed to be 1½ inches. So I marked my drill with some tape. The holes are for threaded inserts, but the way these cutters come packaged, I had to take the inserts off of each of the cutters. For some of them, I even had to use the Allen wrench to get them loose. Other ones came off real easily just with my fingers. The next step is putting those threaded inserts into each of the blanks. Here's where I broke from the directions that were given by Rocklear. I just used the supplied Allen wrench and twisted them in, and they went in very easily. but there are some different directions that Rockler gives, so you might want to try their method instead. The threaded inserts are a very handy part of this design. You'll notice why I say that as this project progresses. This special turning kit mandrel with 5/16" threads is designed to work with these pizza cutter kits. I put the mandrel in the chuck on my lathe after I removed the jaws from the chuck. This is the first example of how handy this design is. Those inserts that I put into the end of each blank turn right onto the mandrel. After securing one end of the blank with the mandrel, I brought the tailstock up and tightened that up. Since I'm batching out quite a few handles at a time, I decided to use my roughing gouge and make all the blanks round first. Before I get into the actual turning, let me tell you a little bit about what my plan was on this design. First of all, where my wife's thumb is I wanted that to be a thumb rest for pushing the pizza cutter through the pizza. The next section where her palm of her hand is really the grip. It's designed to be comfortable for the hand to fit on. On the right side of this photo is the end of the pizza cutter that's sort of shaped like a knob. It's meant to be a counterbalance. It counterbalances the weight of the pizza cutter at the other end, and it also can be pushed down by the arm as the pizza cutter goes through the pizza. Between the pizza cutter head and the thumb rest, I tried to make smooth transitions from one to the other. It's important to note here that the diameter of the mandrel for these pizza cutters and the end of the pizza cutter head that attaches to the handle are exactly the same diameter. That made making this transition very easy. You'll notice in the turnings as I go along in this video and in the photos of all the pizza cutters together that I used this as a basic design but made a lot of varieties of the design as I went along. Every pizza cutter has its own uniquely designed handle. To get started on each of the blanks, I used a parting tool to section off each of the major parts of the design. I used these as guides as I designed each pizza cutter handle. The first step was working on that transition area with the parting tool. Then I moved over and designated where I wanted the thumb rest to stop. After moving the tool rest over, I marked out where the end of the handle would be. And started forming the end of the knob. Then I moved over and decided where the other end of the knob would be. After separating out all the sections, I started using my roughing gouge to rough out the shape. Here I'm roughing out the shape of the grip. Now I'm using my roughing gouge and my spindle gouge to form that thumb rest. Now here the roughing gouge is actually used to smooth the grip. And I'm using the parting tool to smooth the transition before I put in my spindle gouge again. Now I'm moving on to the knob, or that counterbalance. Here I'm using my spindle gouge to form it. To knock down some of the diameter, I'm using my roughing gouge, and it's also used to smooth it and make it more like a ball. Now I've switched back to the spindle gouge to get in some of the more finer details. I've decided that this handle is going to come to a point at the end. Before I remove each handle from the lathe, I check for comfort by grabbing it with the palm of my hand. The next step is sanding. I start each one out with 120 grit of this Abranet mesh. I move up the grits until I finally reach 600. If you're interested in this rock clear dust collection system, I did a YouTube video on it, so you could check my YouTube channel for that. Then I switch over to the micro mesh pads, and these go from 1500 up to 12,000 grit. The next step is parting off the end of the turning blank and forming the end of the handle. This one didn't want to come off easily, so I used my saw to finish it up. I use the belt on my rigid oscillating sander to finish up the ends and smooth them out. As mentioned before, each handle had its own unique shape, and that was true of the ends as well. To finish off sanding the ends, I placed each handle back on the mandrel on the lathe. This is one of those things I mentioned earlier about the mandrel. I was able to sand the ends of the handles without the support from the tailstock. This is a great shot showing how I laid my sandpaper out on the table. I had each stack organized. I pulled the new paper from the right-hand stack and stacked it in the left-hand stack. I really like this Abranet mesh from Mirka for sanding on the lathe. In fact, I did a video on it as well. You might want to check that out. This Abranet mesh is great for sanding on the lathe, but it's also good for flat work too. So you might want to try it. Once all the handles were sanded, I then applied the finish. I used some gauze pads to wipe on the finish, and I also used them when I turned the finish. For the finish, I used Ron Brown's Best walnut oil, wax, and shellac wood turning finish. You can use whatever finish that you like to use for your turnings. I thought the end grain of these handles might get wet when they were washed, so to prevent the water from soaking into the end grain, I sealed them with shellac. As shown here, I used this rack that I made the year before when I did ice cream scoops for everyone. To make the rack, I just drilled holes with the Forstner bit down a piece of 2x4, and then I split the 2x4 in half. It worked out great for this kind of project. The red mat that I'm painting on top of is a silicone mat. I talked about that in my video about silicone and glue don't mix. Well, silicone and shellac don't mix either, so it worked out great for this project as well. With everything finished on the handles, all that was left was to screw the heads onto the handles, put the plastic back on them, and put them in a box. The fact that these handles screw onto the heads makes it really nice because the heads can be removed when they're washed. It felt great when I finally got them all done and they were in the box ready to be shipped out. But when I spread them out on my outfeed table, that was fantastic. I really liked that idea of being able to see them all together. Now I had to come up with a packing idea. Pam was out shopping and she was at what we call here the dollar store and found these oven mitts. She quickly measured them and gave me a call and asked me if I liked the idea. I said, if you think those cutters will fit into them, that would be the perfect thing to wrap them in. I placed the Allen wrench that came with each of the cutters into the thumb of the oven mitt, and the pizza cutter slid right into the oven mitt as if it was designed for it. It was a perfect size. I covered the end of the oven mitt with some tissue paper so that people couldn't see the handle hanging out the end. Yes, in retrospect, I probably should have done a neater job, but it looked okay. I followed up by inserting an envelope that had information and care instructions. Since most of the recipients had no idea what zebra wood was or where it came from, I included this information sheet. I also thought it was important to include care instructions and information about the pizza cutters, so I gave everybody a copy of this sheet that I created. Copies of both of these are available on my website. The envelope with both of these in it was inserted into the oven mitt. As you can see, it was a tight fit, but it worked out okay. As sort of an aside here, Pam and I use our oven mitt to store our pizza cutter in a drawer. Pam wasn't able to get all of the oven mitts with the same pattern, so this was a coffee one that went to two friends that drink coffee a lot, and then the other one was a Santa. We were real happy with the results. And now for the final test. We ordered a pizza from our local pizza place that wasn't cut, and we used the pizza cutter to cut it. We celebrated the fact that we had all the pizza cutters done, and they were ready to go out to our close friends and relatives. I can definitely report that they were a big hit with everyone that got one. Well, hopefully this video gave you an idea of how I batched out these pizza cutters. This is one of those times where I did a really quick job, but I got a big reward in the end. Everybody that received these loved them, and they've been using them ever since. A friend of ours sent this picture of her pizza with the pizza cutter. And Pam's niece is a professional photographer, and this is a photo that she took for one of her clients. I realize because of the international scope of YouTube that maybe not everybody likes pizzas. You may live in an area where pizzas aren't very popular. I did do a video as well on ice cream scoops, and I batched those out one year for Christmas presents. Now, I think everybody likes ice cream, so that would be one that you could do. There's another turning video that I did on my website about a coffee scoop that I made that I use every morning for coffee. And every time I put on a pair of shoes, now in my bedroom, I have a shoehorn, and I turn the handle on that. You'll find links to all three of those videos in my description down below, and I'll also include them at the end of this video. Well, if you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up down below. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, I encourage you to do that today. And when you do, ring that notification bell, and then you know when I produce some videos. Ask any questions or make any comments. I really enjoy answering questions and reading your comments, and they help the channel. Another thing that helps the channel is when you share our videos. Make sure that you share them with other people. And thank you all very much for watching.